Action. Eyes on me, back on the shoe and then step down. Perfect. Yo, what's good, y'all? Man, I'm back. That's all I'm gonna say. It's been a minute. I know on the last joint, I was speaking on the projects that I had coming up, and my plan going into it was to keep y'all up to speed, and I was gonna try to get to these videos in real time for y'all. That was the plan. Let me tell you, it didn't go as I thought it would, which I thought could be a possibility, but I was like, nah, I'm on top of it. I got the content game on lock. Yeah, it's tough, you know what I'm saying? It's one thing to be a content creator that just makes content that's based off making content, which I see a lot of, how to film cinematic and do it, and you just go out and that's what you film. It's another thing when your content is based off of you actually being in the field, doing it, and then having to, yeah, like, you know what I'm saying? But no excuses, my time management was miscalculated. That's what we're gonna call it. We were miscalculated. But the project still happened and I still filmed them. I still have all the content for them. So we're getting to it right now. You know what I'm saying? Better late than never, right? So I had people hit me up for my lighting setup from the last video, from the fitness shoot. I wanted to break that down because I was speaking more on like the business side, as always, on how I got into that position in the first place to do the shoot. But I also wanted to touch on some of the creative that went into it, specifically the lighting. And it's pretty much up to me to bring my aesthetics to it. They didn't want super bright, corporate, basic imagery. So that was like, okay, I can do what I want with it. And for me, whenever I'm going into like a fitness shoot, I'm looking to add drama to it. So I decided to go with the 2-point setup, which is a pretty standard setup. It's nothing complicated. It might look like there's a lot going on in the setup, but there's really not. It's pretty simple. So 2-point setups are pretty versatile. You can use them for all types of different photography. I love to use 2-point cross light setups for fitness. This is gonna give you a more polished look. It's gonna let you shape your highlights and your shadows just a little bit more so you can draw out a certain vibe. And you can get pretty creative with where your shadows fall, depending on where you place your lights. 2-point setups really give you a lot of control over your image. So I went with a combination of continuous and strobes, but continuous we use specifically for video purposes, obviously. We use the strobes for all of the photo, but don't get me wrong, you can use the continuous lights for photo. However, they might not be as powerful as the strobes. I personally wouldn't say one is better than the other, right? It's all subjective at the end of the day, so it really just comes down to what it is that you're shooting and the style that you shoot. I would try both of them just to see what you like, because in certain situations, the continuous light kind of just hits better. And in other situations, you're like, oh, I need a strobe for this. So with continuous, you're gonna be able to see your exposure immediately. You're gonna know exactly what it is because the light's already on your subject, right? You're also gonna know the placements of your shadows, highlights, etc. As where with the strobe, if your strobe has a modeling lamp on it, you could turn it on to kind of illuminate your subject to get an idea of how the light's gonna fall, but it's still not the same when you have the quick burst that comes out of a strobe. So it's gonna take a little bit of mastering the light and learning it to understand what the exposure is gonna be, how the light is gonna fall on your subject, the distance that you need to have your light, etc., etc. Now, after you get seasoned with it, you can kind of set up pretty quick and get straight to it and just make minor adjustments. But off the rip, it's probably gonna take a little bit of you learning all of these other factors that come in with using strobes. So one's not better than the other. They both serve their own purpose. I will say this, if you're using continuous light, make sure that you pay attention to any ambient light or other light sources that are anywhere near your set, because those will spill into your shot and the camera will pick them up. Opposed to strobes, strobes overpower any other light that's gonna be in the room, depending on what power you got it on, but 9 times out of 10, it's gonna knock out any other light that exists. So keep that in mind if you're shooting with continuous. Some people like to say that you have a little bit more creative control with the type of modifiers that you use on strobes, but I still think this kind of varies because if you know how to shape light, you know how to shape light, right? The learning curve for strobes can be a little bit more difficult just because it's not a constant source. So you're gonna have to set up a light, take an image, and then analyze your image and read the light and see what's going on and what you want to change. And then you have to know how to make those adjustments based off of what you're reading. So it really just is like a thing that you have to master, which takes time, opposed to a continuous light. You pop it up and go to work. You can see exactly what you're shooting. But I shoot both. And on this shoot, we shot both, but one was for video and one was for photo. For my strobes, I have Paul C. Buff Alien Bs. I have a B800 and a B400. These are a little bit older. I know the newer models, I believe, are called Digi-Bs. These are just reliable lights that I've had in my kit for years, so I still have them, I still use them. We use Pocket Wizard triggers, which mount right on top of the camera. That sends a signal to the receiver, and the one strobe actually signals the other strobe. It has a mode called slave mode on there. What that is a little sensor that they put on the back of the strobe, and it reacts to any flash that goes off. So if there's another burst of light, it's gonna trigger that strobe to flash too, and they work in sync for each other. Thing about that is, if anybody else has a flash, even if they use their phone or any type of bright burst of light, if that sensor picks it up, it's gonna go off. Probably won't hurt your image, but you just have to tell somebody, hey, turn off your flash. So with the continuous lights, I use my Aperture 120D and I use my Zhiyun Molus X60s for RGB fill lights and kind of like practical lights depending on the shot, which I'll show you guys in the shots how I use them. But we use the Aperture 120D as the key light. That was our main source, and that lit up everything pretty well for us. And we moved through our sets pretty efficiently. I had my assistant giving me a hand. He helped me move the lights around. Sometimes we kept the second light hidden, but in fitness stuff, sometimes I like that second light to creep in. For these, it was in the background. If you saw it, I didn't feel like it was anything that was out of context, so I left it in the shot. I wasn't worried about cutting around it. But these Molus X60s are crazy. The output, crazy. I'm still amazed at the performance on these things. We wanted to add red into the shots because red is on brand with Resorts World. We kind of brought that in for certain shots, and then other shots that kind of just kept the light warm just to match the 120. We still went with the cross light setup, so I was still shooting with the key light in front and bringing the other light in the back. For video, it gives you a very cinematic feel. So what we try to do is keep our second light at more of a distance than we would with the photo, just because I didn't want it to be as harsh. I just wanted it to kind of just slide some light or some shadows across the background from the machinery and the other stuff that was back there. So came out pretty dope. So the setup is pretty much the same as if you were using a single light, right? But now you just have an additional light. So you're gonna use your key light, which is your main light to light your subject, which you typically wanna set up at about a 45-degree angle to your subject. That's gonna be the main light that's on them. You wanna make sure that that's showing their features the exact way that you want them. Your secondary light with a cross light setup is typically going to go just on the opposite side of your key light. So what I like to use as an example is something like a clock, right? Dead in the center is your subject. Your key light would be at 7 o'clock and your backlight would be at 2 o'clock. Now, you can position these lights around to get the desired look that you want, but typically that's going to be the standard starting point that you're going to work with. Now you can bring your backlight down and act more as a fill because some of that light will spill onto your subject, so the shadows won't be as dramatic. So think of bringing it from a 2 to a 3. Once you kind of learn how to pivot these lights around your subject, you're gonna start to realize the different effects that they give you. But ultimately, you wanna keep these lights on opposing sides of each other. The other thing that you wanna keep in mind is the type of modifier that you're using on the light. Typically for your key light, you're gonna wanna soften that up. So you're gonna get a softbox on there. You could pop a grid on there, and that grid is going to shape your light even more. It's gonna prevent it from spilling too far on the background. It gives it a little bit more direction. Here we didn't use one. I just wanted soft light, and I didn't mind it spreading a little bit because we had some equipment surrounding our subjects that I wanted to be visible to a degree. But on your backlight, you could kind of play around with that. Sometimes I will diffuse that. I'll throw a softbox on there. Sometimes I'll just throw a cone reflector on there, but you have to be aware of your intensity, because if it's too harsh, it's gonna spill forward and it'll probably give you some light leaks into your camera, which, don't get me wrong, sometimes some light leaks coming from the back can give you some cool effects if you can catch the right angle, but sometimes that can be a headache. So you just have to pay attention to the power on both strobes. But definitely try out using different modifiers. I like to use strip boxes because it's in a similar shape as the subject that I'm shooting. You can use a different number of combinations with the modifiers that you use. If you want to go with 2 cone reflectors, you can. Again, you just have to be aware of how the light falls, what it's revealing, and the shadows, how it's interacting with your subject. So at the end of the day, it's very subjective. I'm not gonna tell you that you have to use a strip box in order for you to get an image that looks like any of these. You can use various modifiers to get the desired image that you want. A 2-point crosslit setup is gonna give you a lot more drama and a lot more depth to your shot, because you're gonna have control of filling your subject, of lighting them up, and then your backlight or side light typically is gonna give you separation from your background. So it's gonna give you layers to your image, and you can use that to your benefit. It just gives you a really polished look. So again, because this was a commercial shoot, we definitely wanted that polished high-end look, and that's where that 2-point setup comes into play. So one of the main reasons that I wanted to go with the strobes was because we were going to be doing action shots. And with action shots, you wanna be able to stop that image at a split second. With continuous light, you end up having to move things around, adjust your shutter, adjust your aperture, adjust your ISO, and then you start introducing grain to the image, right? And because they're continuous lights, they don't have a strong high-end output. So with the strobes, you're gonna get a quick burst of light, and it's gonna let you stop down your action, and you're gonna be able to catch things like jumps or any movements or anything that they're doing. Now, if you're not shooting action shots, this might not even be a factor for you. If you are shooting fitness, I would highly recommend that you consider using strobes for doing that. I will say some of the issues that you should be aware of would be overexposure, getting too much light from your field light or from that backlight. If you have that intensity too high, it's gonna flush out your image. So you wanna be aware of the intensities that you're using on both of your lights. Your field light should never outpower your key light, or you can use ND filters to control your exposure. You can get some really harsh shadows depending on how you place your light. So you wanna make sure that you're using a soft modifier so you can control those shadows, or adjust your field accordingly so that it softens the shadows while you're shooting. Make sure that your exposure is balanced. You might have to check this a few times throughout the shoot, or if you're adjusting things, you just want to make sure that you're maintaining a consistent and natural look throughout the entire shoot. Typically for a campaign, everything needs to be cohesive and work together. So you want your lighting to be consistent across the board. You don't want your lighting setups to be vastly different every time that you have a different setup. So you have to learn how to keep everything balanced and consistent. Lastly, all I'm gonna say is practice, 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 practice. If you're already using one light, it's not gonna be too much different to add in a second light. You just need to learn how to do it. Once you get comfortable with it, add it into the resume. So yeah, I just wanted to break down a simple 2-point setup. I love cross-lighting my images. I've been doing it for years. I think anybody can pretty much achieve this if you're using one light, which I'm sure most people have tried using one light unless you're just strictly a natural light photographer. And in that case, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. But if you've only been using one light and you're considering using a second one, I would do it because it'll help you understand how light works. You'll be able to get a more dynamic look out of your work. You don't always have to use 2 lights, but knowing when to use them and knowing how to use them can go a long way with your work and enhance your portfolio depending on what field you're trying to get into. So yeah, if this video helps you guys out, smash that like button. Do me a favor, y'all. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications for the next joints that I drop. If there's anything you guys want to know, let me know down in the comments or hit me on a DM over on Instagram. I'm gonna try to, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm gonna try to stay on top of it. The schedule's a little clear right now, so we're gonna try to stick to it. I'm gonna try to bang these out and cover the other shoots that I did, but hopefully I get back to y'all sooner than later. Until then though, I'm out.